James Cameron's Avatar saga keeps pushing boundaries, and the fourth installment might actually be the most crucial one yet. We're looking at a December 19th, 2029 release date, but here's the thing that most people don't realize. This entire project lives or dies based on how Fire and Ash performs at the box office. Cameron himself has been brutally transparent about this. The third film pulled in over $1.2 billion, which sounds massive, but for Avatar standards, that's honestly underwhelming. Any other franchise would celebrate those numbers, but Cameron needs these movies to hit closer to $2 billion to justify the insane production costs and keep the saga rolling. Now here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Cameron has been vocal about Avatar needing to be one of the top 3 or 4 highest grossing movies ever made just to break even. The production infrastructure alone is staggering. They built permanent performance capture stages in New Zealand, developed proprietary underwater filming technology, and Cameron's team created entirely new camera systems that can shoot at higher frame rates while maintaining 3D depth. All of that costs money that most studios would never risk. Disney inherited this whole operation when they acquired Fox, and while they're committed for now, every film has to prove itself financially. What really fascinates me about where this franchise is heading involves Kiri's role in the entire mythology. After the time jump we're getting in Avatar 4, she becomes the primary narrator. Sigourney Weaver confirmed this after years of keeping it quiet. This isn't just a creative choice, it's thematically perfect. Cameron has always rotated narrators to show generational shifts. Jake carried the first film, Loak shaped the emotional core of Fire and Ash, and now Kiri steps up as the literal voice of Pandora. Her connection to Eywa goes way deeper than anyone else's, and Fire and Ash already proved she can manipulate Pandora's biology in ways that completely break the rules we thought existed. The moment she alters Spider's DNA so he can breathe Pandora's air without a mask changes everything. Think about the implications here. Spider isn't just some kid caught between two worlds anymore. He's living proof that humans can biologically adapt to Pandora. If that transformation can be replicated on a mass scale, we're not talking about mining operations anymore. We're talking about full colonization. Thousands of humans could permanently settle on Pandora without needing any protective equipment. The RDA wouldn't need to keep flying back and forth to Earth. They could just move in and stay. There's actually a leaked concept art from early 2024 that shows what appears to be human settlements integrated into Pandora's ecosystem, with structures that blend RDA architecture and Na'vi organic design. If that's legit, it suggests Avatar 4 explores a timeline where humans and Na'vi attempt coexistence rather than constant warfare. That would be a massive tonal shift for the franchise, and honestly, it's the only direction that makes narrative sense at this point. You can't just keep repeating the same battle between humans and Na'vi for 5 movies. Eventually, something has to fundamentally change. This is where Michelle Yeoh's character Karina Moog becomes absolutely critical. She's a human scientist who skipped Fire and Ash entirely, but filmed scenes years ago to maintain continuity with the younger cast. Cameron described her as fun and fascinating, which probably means she's dangerously intelligent. My theory is that she's the one who figures out how Spider's transformation works and tries to weaponize it or turn it into a mass production process. She represents a smarter kind of human threat, not military aggression like Quaritch, but scientific understanding that could irreversibly tip the balance of power. Here's where things get interesting from a lore perspective. The Avatar wikis and some of the expanded universe materials hint that Eywa isn't just a passive planetary consciousness. There are suggestions that Eywa can actively reject or accept individuals based on their intentions. Grace was rejected during her consciousness transfer because her human mind couldn't fully integrate with the Na'vi neural network. But Kiri was born directly from that failed transfer, which means she exists in a space between human consciousness and Eywa's will. She's not entirely Na'vi, and she's definitely not human. She's something new. If Kiri can grant Spider the ability to breathe Pandora's air, that means she's not just connected to Eywa. She can channel Eywa's power to rewrite biology itself. That's godlike power, and it completely reframes what the conflict is really about. The RDA doesn't need to mine unobtainium if they can just adapt humans to live on Pandora permanently. The entire economic model shifts from extraction to colonization, and that's way more complicated morally. Are the Na'vi justified in defending their world if humans literally have nowhere else to go? That's the kind of ethical complexity Cameron loves exploring. Speaking of Quaritch, his survival after fire and ash feels almost guaranteed at this point. The golden rule applies here. Nobody means no death. Cameron reshot the ending in August, and while that could have been to close his arc if Avatar 4 never happened, the Frontiers of Pandora DLC already leaked what comes next. There's audio of Quaritch giving orders to Tyler Bukowski from the RDA after supposedly falling into that magnetic flux. He's alive, and his story desperately needs more depth. In Fire and Ash, he just swaps his loyalty from the RDA to the Ash people, but keeps hating Jake Sully. That's not character growth, that's just switching teams. He acknowledged his villainous actions, but never actually redeemed himself. Avatar 4 needs to push him somewhere more interesting, maybe even toward reluctant cooperation, or a complete psychological breakdown as his Na'vi body conflicts with his human consciousness. There's a fascinating detail from the Fire and Ash production that most people missed. Stephen Lang mentioned in an interview that Quaritch's relationship with Spider was supposed to go much darker in the original script, with Quaritch attempting to fully indoctrinate Spider into viewing the Na'vi as enemies. That storyline got softened significantly, which suggests Cameron is saving that psychological warfare angle for Avatar 4. Now that Spider has been biologically transformed, Quaritch might see him as the key to humanity's survival on Pandora. That creates a twisted dynamic where Quaritch genuinely believes he's protecting his son by trying to use him as a weapon against the Na'vi. The franchise has also been building towards showing Earth for literal years now, and we still haven't seen it. Cameron confirmed that Avatar 5 will feature Na'vi traveling to Earth, but I think Avatar 4 needs to show us the devastation first. The entire human motivation revolves around escaping a dying planet, but we've only heard about it through dialogue. Actually depicting the ruined cities, the environmental collapse, the desperation that drives the RDA's exploitation would give the human characters way more dimension. It would force the audience to understand their perspective even if we don't agree with their methods. There's actually some really compelling evidence that Avatar 4 will include Earth sequences. Back in 2022, production designer Ben Proctor posted concept art showing dystopian cityscapes with massive vertical farms and enclosed atmospheric domes. That art was quickly taken down, but it got archived by fans. The designs showed Earth cities as hyper-dense, vertically oriented megastructures where natural sunlight barely reaches the lower levels. If that's accurate, it paints Earth not just as environmentally damaged, but as fundamentally uninhabitable for most of humanity. That would explain why the RDA is so desperate to colonize Pandora rather than just mine it and leave. Now, let's talk about the possibility of James Wan directing portions of Avatar 4. Cameron's workflow has evolved dramatically. By Fire and Ash, he was delegating massive chunks of production to secondary teams while he focused on performance capture, editing, and post-production reshaping. He's openly said he can imagine preparing scenes in extreme detail, handing off execution, then returning to reshape everything in the editing room. That's wildly different from traditional directing, and it opens the door for someone like Wan to bring their own visual style into the franchise. Wan leans hard into atmosphere, mood, and high contrast lighting. His version of Pandora would probably feel darker and more volatile, especially if the story explores the frozen Arctic regions that were teased. James Wan rumor actually has more weight to it than people realize. Back in late 2023, Wan posted a cryptic Instagram story showing him at a motion capture facility with the caption deleted within hours. Around the same time, Cameron gave an interview where he mentioned wanting to bring in filmmakers who understand spectacle but also character-driven horror. Wan fits that description perfectly. His work on Aquaman proved he can handle massive underwater sequences and alien ecosystems, and his horror background means he knows how to build tension in seemingly beautiful environments. If Cameron hands off the second unit work for the ice regions to Wan, we could see sequences that feel genuinely unsettling rather than just visually spectacular. Visually, Fire and Ash still looks absolutely stunning. The new environments feel massive and alive, the Ash Clan design immediately stands out, and the creatures feel more aggressive and untamed than anything we've seen. But here's where I think some of the criticism is actually valid. Fire and Ash doesn't deliver that jaw-dropping technological leap the first Avatar had, or even the underwater breakthroughs from The Way of Water. Cameron raised the bar so high that shocking audiences on a technical level might be impossible now. Instead, this feels like refinement, polishing an already perfected visual language. Some people even say Pandora looks too clean in certain shots, almost artificial or overly smooth. That might sound harsh, but I get it. When you've spent 3 movies in this world, the novelty fades a bit. However, the tech innovation for Avatar 4 might actually be happening behind the scenes rather than on screen. There are reports that Weta Digital has developed AI-assisted animation tools that can generate realistic Na'vi facial expressions based on actor performance data, cutting rendering time by nearly 40%. That doesn't make the movie look better necessarily, but it means Cameron can iterate on scenes much faster and try different emotional beats without waiting months for final renders. That's a production breakthrough rather than a visual one, but it matters for how ambitious the storytelling can be. Narratively, Fire and Ash plays it safe. The trailers made it clear we were getting the same central heroes, similar conflicts, and classic Cameron structure. Early cast comments hyped up some massive narrative swerve, but honestly, if you've watched enough blockbusters, you can predict where things are going pretty early. But that's never been Avatar's core appeal. They're straightforward emotional epics that push characters toward an inevitable endgame, and Fire and Ash stays completely true to that identity. What really struck me is how much Fire and Ash feels designed to work as a potential series finale. Cameron admitted he wasn't sure Avatar 4 and 5 would even happen, so he made sure this film could function as a satisfying ending. You can feel it throughout the final act. Spider gets fully accepted into Na'vi culture. Neytiri finally embraces him as her son. Kiri learns the truth about her origin. The ending mirrors the first Avatar in subtle ways, and fallen characters from previous films appear, giving everything this reflective, almost elegiac tone. For long stretches, it genuinely feels like the conclusion to a decade-long saga. But Cameron never fully closes the door. Humans aren't completely driven off Pandora this time, only part of their military presence gets dismantled. Spider's transformation makes him incredibly valuable to humanity rather than just another lost kid. Characters like Quaritch and Varang are left in ambiguous states with no clear death confirmation. It's deliberate and very Cameron. Behind the scenes, Avatar 4 is basically greenlit already. Insiders say a large portion of the first act was filmed years ago. There's a significant time jump built into the story, and Kiri becomes the primary narrator. Studio executives reportedly had no major issues with Cameron's script, which means his long-term vision stays intact. That vision increasingly revolves around Kiri and Spider as the central figures driving the franchise forward. Here's something that leaked from the New Zealand production back in 2023. Crew members reported filming sequences in massive refrigerated sound stages designed to simulate Arctic conditions. Actors were performing in sub-zero temperatures while wearing motion capture suits, which is genuinely brutal. That confirms the ice biome Na'vi clans are getting significant screen time in Avatar 4, not just brief appearances. Cameron apparently wants to show how different Na'vi cultures evolved in complete isolation from each other, with the ice clans having entirely different spiritual practices and relationships with Eywa. Kiri's origin is one of the most important pieces of Avatar lore now. She's genetically identical to Grace's avatar but has no biological father. She's essentially a living anomaly, conceived during the failed consciousness transfer when Grace died. Something triggered life creation inside that avatar while connected to Eywa, resulting in Kiri's birth. That's why her connection to Eywa feels different. She doesn't just communicate with Pandora, she experiences it on a deeper, almost divine level. There's actually a deleted scene from The Way of Water that explains this more explicitly. Kiri has a vision where she sees Grace's consciousness merging with Eywa during the transfer attempt, and instead of being rejected, Grace becomes part of Eywa's neural network. Kiri is the physical manifestation of that merger, which makes her part human consciousness, part Na'vi biology, and part Eywa's living will. Cameron cut that scene because he felt it was too direct, but it explains why Kiri can do things no other Na'vi can do. By Avatar 4, Kiri's abilities evolve far beyond healing or vision-based moments. She's effectively wielding Eywa's neural network like a living system, directing wildlife, reshaping environments, and turning nature itself into a strategic force. As Jake and Neytiri step into mentor roles, Kiri unites clans across entirely new biomes, including frozen regions populated by Na'vi adapted to Arctic conditions with furred queues and heavier builds. The scale becomes planetary. Cameron has also hinted that Avatar 4 will introduce a completely new threat that isn't human or Na'vi. During a podcast appearance in mid-2024, he mentioned wanting to explore what else might exist in Pandora's oceans and unexplored regions. There's concept art floating around showing massive bioluminescent creatures that dwarf even the Tulkun, with designs that suggest they're predatory rather than peaceful. If Pandora has apex predators that even the Na'vi fear, that adds a whole new layer of danger to the story. The most interesting development for Avatar 5 involves the Na'vi going to Earth, but the setup for that journey has to happen in Avatar 4. There are leaked casting calls from early 2025 looking for actors to play Earth-based resistance fighters who oppose the RDA's exploitation of Pandora. That suggests there's a human faction on Earth that wants to help the Na'vi, possibly environmental activists or scientists who view the RDA as criminals. If Avatar 4 establishes that alliance, it sets up Avatar 5 as a story where Na'vi and sympathetic humans team team up to expose the RDA's crimes to Earth's population. This is where Avatar stops being just about defending a world and starts asking what happens when two species are forced to evolve together. That's what makes the next chapter genuinely exciting, and honestly, that's what the franchise needs to stay relevant. Cameron isn't just making big spectacle films anymore. He's building towards something that questions what it means to be human versus being alive, and whether consciousness and connection matter more than biology. That's ambitious as hell, and whether it works or not, you have to respect the vision.